Whoso pulleth out this sword of this stone and anvil is rightwise king, born of all England, were the words of Sir Thomas Malory, a 15th century Middle English poet, who in the book Le Morte d'Arthur penned down what would be transcribed by future generations as the death of King Arthur. Of course, Arthur's heroic deeds are well known today. Fictitious or not, his effect on Western culture is monumental. The gallant king of the Britons riding into battle with his magical sword Excalibur and his fellow knights are steeped in our consciousness. And like all our classical heroes, King Arthur's legend is built on the back of a certain story device that has found its way throughout our oldest texts, and is one which still shows up today in some of our stories. In many ways, the Arthurian legend is almost as famous as the prophecy that sparks the epic journey. A nation in strife and chaos, and only one man, the one who pulls a sword from a stone, is the one to save us all. The premise is simple, but its promise is immense, and it sets up an exciting story for the reader. But prophecies, as they have come to be known through the history of classic literature, do more than just serve plot purposes. Jumping back a few centuries before Malory's work set Arthur's heroism in stone, there was Beowulf, another work by the Anglo-Saxons like Arthur's Tales, which too had its own share of prophecies. A few centuries before that, there were the prophecies of the biblical passages. But like most of our modern achievements, the art of prophecy is beholden to the ancient civilizations. In the islands of the Mycenaean Greeks, in the dim-lit temples of the god Apollo, in the renowned city of Delphi, sat the oracle. Her job, as decreed by her position among her people and the gods, was to offer wisdom of the future to anyone who crossed her path. The mythological texts that we have today of the harrowing journey of the hero Odysseus after the Battle of Troy, to the 12 labors of Heracles, and even the reconstructed Nordic tales of Thor and Loki from the cold, harsh lands of the north, all describe prophetic visions of how events might unfold in the future. But for the Greeks, the idea of destiny or fate was so powerful that they even had an embodiment in their pantheon of godly characters, in the form of the Sisters of Fate. A lot of cultures around the world had similar entities at the time, but the Moirai, or the Sisters, sat together and in unison weaved the threads of time. Everyone's part in life was an ensemble of threads that meshed to form a larger tapestry. And sometimes these individual threads came entangled with someone else's, whether it be in a moment of good fortune or ill fortune. There is always an aura of inevitability in the Greek stories, that despite all the feats of strength and bravery performed in these tales, and the status of the heroic figures in question, their actions are predestined to go awry in horrible ways, and the clueless characters almost accept the arbitrariness of their fate and just move on. The lion's share of the chaos these stories seem to propagate was also down to the oracle themselves. The Sibylline oracles delivered by the priestesses never held good news for the mythological heroes before they took on any endeavor. Before Odysseus left his kingdom of Ithaca to fight in the Trojan War in Homer's Iliad, he is told by Tiresias that you may want a sweet, smooth journey back home, but a god will make it hard for you. After the Trojan War, Odysseus finds himself languishing in the vast Aegean Sea for nearly 10 years. The warning of Tiresias comes true, and Odysseus has indeed incurred the wrath of the sea god Poseidon on his travels back home. The tragedy of the Greek stories were meant to be just that. The suffering of the heroes were meant to be a connection between us and them. Their greatness in stature made them susceptible to great tragedy. Around the late 1500s, Shakespeare, influenced by the tragedies of the Greeks, had his own take on these classic literary devices. Of course, modern literature has a huge debt towards Shakespeare. He reinvented our use of the language and how we use it today. Shakespeare doesn't try to hide his inspirations when it comes to his stories. He borrowed elements from the Greeks and the Romans, except his characters were no longer the great mythic icons of yesteryears. Shakespearean heroes would often be kingly figures or even leaders, but they would be equally flawed. In Macbeth, which was written during the height of Shakespeare's powers, you can see this play out in a gruesome affair of betrayal and violence as our lead character, Lord Macbeth, implodes through the foresight of his own actions. At the very start of the play, 3 witches visit Macbeth in the field of war and announce 3 prophecies, in pretty much classic fashion. Though Macbeth feels invincible with the knowledge the witches provide him, knowing the future proves to be his eventual downfall, as he spirals down a bloody path of typical Shakespearean proportions. This is what makes Shakespeare such a great storyteller. The seeds of his tragic stories often came from the character themselves. It has been many years since Shakespeare, and more than double that time since the Greeks, and yet the weight of our classics seem as powerful today as they were back then. Story devices and techniques evolve over time, of course they do, but with time, there is also a desire to look back. When J.R.R. Tolkien wrote The Lord of the Rings in the 1950s, he did just that. The 3 books evoke the same sweeping feeling of our epics. The lyricism and the beauty of his prose reminds me of the Greek stories of old, but his characters have the same flaws of the Shakespearean era. We obviously attribute The Lord of the Rings with more achievements than just being a throwback to the classical or the romantic period. It was also the birth of modern fantasy as we know it. And that brings us to the larger point, that the stories of today only exist because of the stories we've grown up hearing since generations. Earlier this year, I read Kafka on the Shore by Haruki Murakami, and reading through the story with all its fascinating ideas of parallel worlds and predestined prophecies, it made me realize that Murakami would never have written the same exact story if Sophocles of ancient Greece had never written Oedipus Rex. The self-fulfilling Oedipal prophecy is so well known today. A son who is prophesied to kill his father and marry his mother, and by trying to avoid it, he makes it come true. There are so many stories being written today, more so than any era before, that there is bound to be room for different ideas. But those ideas can only exist if we already have something to build on. Even works of genius require the collective and humanitarian effort. Great works are shaped by other greater works all the time, and it's this intertextual referencing that advances our stories into the future. So the next time you try reading or watching a story, try identifying these devices and techniques, because they're more than just a way to make your experience engaging. They're also the next step in a chain of events that stretches far back in time, to the first storyteller, to the ancient civilizations, through Shakespeare's riveting plays, to Tolkien, to Murakami, and to you. Hey guys, if you've made it this far, then I just wanted to say thanks for watching this video. The fact that people are actually watching my videos is just crazy to me. Around 1,500 people watched the one I made on Superman American Alien, and I can't even comprehend it. Really, just a massive thanks to you guys. Anyways, I wanted to make this video for some time. I sort of delayed it quite a bit, but it actually started out as an Excalibur essay, but then I decided to do one about prophecies instead. I don't know how that came about, but anyways, I wanted to explore their use in our stories through the years. I'll definitely be making more videos around the subject of classical and fantasy fiction in the future, so this was just a start. And if you guys enjoy the content, then make sure you subscribe to the channel and leave a like or share any of the videos you really love. It helps me and the channel spread out and sort of do its thing. I've even left a link to my Patreon somewhere on the video or the description, so if you feel like pledging, then I'm sincerely indebted to you. Of course, you needn't do that at all because all my videos will still be free and anyone can enjoy them here or not enjoy them, whichever suits you. But if you want to support me, then feel free to do so as well. It costs $2 per month and patrons will be credited at the end of my videos. Anyways, I guess I'll see you guys in my next video. Check out my other videos and playlists, you might find something you like. I wish you guys the best for the rest of the week.